A few years ago, I went to my 50th high school reunion back in my hometown in Nebraska. And when I went back there, all these old memories came up, memories of being with my family and with my friends as a teenager and going to school there. And what really struck me about all those memories was how immature I was in high school. I remembered passing notes in English class and troubling the teacher. I remember saying stupid things to girls. The clothes I wore, plaid pants. It makes me cringe now to think of what I was like when I was a teenager. And when I was at the reunion, I said to one of my classmates, I said, I was so immature when I was in high school. And she said, we were all immature. We were teenagers. I mean, what do you expect out of a teenager? And of course, she was right. When we're young, we do foolish things. We say foolish things. I remember my mom telling me, listen, think, she said, think before you speak. Look before you leap. In other words, be wise. We hope that as we get older, we get wiser. You can't teach a person to be wise. I mean, you can give a person knowledge, but you can't give them wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience, from living your life. And usually it comes from failures. If you can learn from your failures, then you have the potential to become wise. Now, not everybody gets wiser as they get older, unfortunately. I remember my friend Fred. I worked with him when we were young guys, and afterwards when he was middle-aged, he had a really good job with the Forest Service, and he liked the job, it paid well, and everything was going well, but he quit that job in anger because his boss was a woman, and he didn't want to be bossed around by a woman. And he never found a job that good again. I mean, it was a foolish thing to do. Or I remember my friend Gil. Gil and I worked together and were friends. And I lost track of him. And over the years, I learned that his family was asking all his friends from the past if they'd seen Gil, because they said, we haven't seen him for over a year. Nobody knew anything. Well, Gil had gotten involved in drugs. He's smuggling drugs from Mexico. It's a dangerous game. And so the only thing we can think is that he got on the wrong end of a drug deal and got killed in Mexico. He was a fool to get started in that. Be wise. Don't be foolish. That's the message of the book of Proverbs that we heard today. We're not talking about salvation here. We're talking about wisdom, about common sense, about living your life in a smart way. God gave us brains. We should use them. Sometimes we think of the book of Proverbs as a series of sort of cross-stitch sayings, home is where the heart is, a stitch in time saves nine. And there's lots of sayings in Proverbs, but the thrust of the book of Proverbs is much deeper. It's about gaining wisdom. To be wise means to have patience. Don't rush into things. To be wise means to have humility. Don't assume you know everything about a situation. To be wise means to have restraint. Hold back on your impulse to react right away. Look at the big picture. Take the long view. get multiple viewpoints. That's how we come to wisdom. Our lesson from Proverbs this morning is a portrait of a wise woman. It's not really a description of the good wife, even though that's how the passage starts out, but it's a description of a wise woman who runs her family business. And even though she lives in a patriarchal society where supposedly men run everything, it's obvious that she's a very good businesswoman. She runs the business. She knows when to buy, when to sell. She knows how to manage people. She knows how to get production. She keeps things harmonious. She knows how to make deals. And she's kind. She deals with the poor and the needy. She runs her household with love. And people admire her for her strength and dignity. She's a strong woman. It says, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Well, the Bible, is clearly a patriarchal book. But in the book of Proverbs, wisdom is portrayed as a woman. Only God is truly wise, but God grants wisdom to those who will listen. And in the book of Proverbs, that means a woman. If you want to get action, ask a man. If you want wisdom, ask a woman. I can still hear my mother telling me, think before you act. Use your noggin, Bob. Be wise. Don't be foolish. I wish that all our leaders were wise. Some of our leaders are wise. Our politicians, our scientists, scholars, our writers. But many, I'm afraid, are not. For instance, we've totally bought into technology. Whatever the tech giants come up with, we just adopt it unthinking. Is that wise? We use money as the measure of all things. We can justify anything as long as it pays. Is that wise? We have the ability now to destroy the planet we're living on. Scientists tell us that if we keep emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, eventually the climate is going to become unlivable for human life. We can destroy the planet that we're living on. We can kill the golden goose. But is it wise? You may have heard of the book Silent Spring, written by Rachel Carson and published in 1962. Rachel Carson was born in 1907. She grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania, and as a little girl, she loved to roam through the 65 acres that they had and learn all about the plants and the animals, and she was a writer from early on. She was a bright young woman, and she went to college, and her zoology professor suggested that she become a scientist and a writer. And so that's the path she took. She did her graduate work in the 1930s, which was a time when there was no money anywhere, and she had to really work hard because she had to support her mother and her two nieces, as well as try to do her studies. But she got a job with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, where she wrote information pamphlets and lots of brochures and things, and she became really good at her writing and moved up in the Fish and Wildlife Service. And in the 1950s, she wrote two very popular books on the oceans that many people read, and she was able to become a full-time writer. And by 1957, she was very concerned about the use of pesticides in the environment, especially the use of DDT. The chemical companies were pushing the use of pesticides and DDT because they were miraculous, and they could get rid of insects on crops and do all kinds of things, get rid of mosquito populations and reduce the amount of malaria, and it's like better living through chemistry. Of course the chemists were right. But she investigated the use of DDT very carefully, did all her background research, and talked to many people and looked at the scientific record. She was trained as a scientist, and she made sure that she was on solid ground. And in 1962, she published Silent Spring, which thoroughly exposed the dangers of pesticides, especially DDT. It's true that DDT killed mosquitoes, but it also killed songbirds. And in the opening sentences of her book, she asked the readers to imagine a world without songbirds. It says this: "It was a spring without voices. In the mornings, which had once throbbed with the dawn chorus of robins, catbirds, doves, jays, and wrens, and scores of other bird voices, there was now no sound. Only silence lay over the fields and woods and marshes." That vision of a world where the bird life has been decimated is frightening, and it caught people's attention. And she went on to describe how important the birds and the insects are to our environment. And she said that in nature, nothing exists alone. Everything is connected to everything else. And she made the case that our bodies are permeable. Chemicals in the environment enter our bodies and affect our health. People didn't know these things before she wrote this. This was news to a lot of people. And so it began the public awareness and public consciousness of the need to have a clean environment. And after the publication of her book, there was a revolution of consciousness. And people began to see the need for protecting the environment. And as a result of her writings, the Environmental Protection Agency was established in 1965, and DDT was banned in 1972. So Rachel Carson is now remembered as the founder of the environmental movement. She was a wise woman. She was strong, and she was determined, and she made a difference in the life of the entire world. The Bible says, "Be wise, don't be foolish." Oh, that today we would be wise as Rachel Carson.